My favourite quote in the world. Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. That's it. One line. So easy to remember, yet so easy to forget. I've searched for ways to develop courage ever since I read that. Well, it's taken me 30 years, but I think I found a way. And I want to tell you about it because I think it might be useful. We develop courage by meeting adversity, moment by moment, whether it comes uninvited or as a result of a choice that we have made. I've come to believe that adversity is a gift because it's the only thing that I know of that offers us the opportunity for expansion. Hard conversations, difficult choices, life's catastrophes, things we didn't want or expect. Each of them whispers to our soul, are we going to shrink or expand? Most of us go our whole lives without ever fully meeting ourselves, running from hard moments, running from the storm, pretending that everything is okay, preferring to stay small, play it safe, wait it out, than turning to face it. The truth is, there's an incredible gift waiting for us if we move towards the storm. The storm isn't here to break us. It's here to set us free. And if we can find the courage to stand in it and move through it, I believe that we will meet the version of us that we were always meant to be. I don't think we're here to collect treasure and followers. I think we're here to grow. I think we're here to expand and evolve. And adversity is the mechanism that helps us do that. It demands growth. It forces us to occupy those raw, unfiltered parts of our being. It strips away everything superficial and offers us something sacred. The truth. The truth of who we are, the truth of what we are. And if we're willing to sit in that space of not knowing for long enough, the truth of what we came here to do. Because it's in the confrontation with our greatest fears and challenges that we meet ourselves, where we forge character, develop courage, build resilience, learn compassion, deepen our capacity to love. It's also the place where the energy to create something new resides. It's in the ruins of what was, where possibility and potential come together to create what might be. So if you are in that place, if you're lost, or you're stuck, or you're feeling overwhelmed, if you feel as though your life is falling apart, congratulations. Truly, you've been given a gift. Take it, use it, embrace it, learn everything you can from it. Because if you do, I think you'll discover something that very few people ever get to discover. Your deepest power. Because this moment of collapse is a doorway back to you. Welcome to your greatest comeback. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to The Greatest Comeback, a podcast that explores the transformative power of failure and how adversity can be the catalyst for our growth, our healing, and becoming the greatest versions of ourselves. My name is Luke Francis, and each week I have the privilege of sitting down with people from all walks of life and listening to them tell their comeback stories. Stories of failure, defeat, and loss, and finding the courage to start again. I love a comeback story. I love the power of storytelling. Stories make us feel. They speak to the heart. They move us to action. People don't change because of logic. People change because of emotion. And emotion is sparked by story. particularly a comeback story. The thing I love most about comeback stories is that they show us that change is possible, not just as an idea, but as something lived and breathed. There's something magical about watching someone transform in real life. It doesn't just inspire us, it invites us to do the same. We live in a world obsessed with winning, but rarely do we talk about losing. Losing has been banished to the outer limits of our lives. Our losses have become footnotes written so small that no one else can read them. Instead, we broadcast the best aspects of ourselves. Our social media has given us a shop front. And in our shop window, we display the best items, the best photographs. We post the best updates, the new job, the promotion, the new house, the new car, the new relationship, the new baby, the new habit, the new interest, anything that supports the narrative that my life is freaking amazing and I hop from one lily pad to the next. Now, not only is that not true, I think it does the rest of us a disservice. Because the more we feel compelled to display the best items of ourselves, the less space and the less willingness we have to display and showcase what we might regard as the worst aspects of ourselves. And in turn, the less permission we give ourselves and each other to be vulnerable and authentic. I think we've forgotten to honor failure. I think we've forgotten the pivotal role it plays in our evolution. Which is ironic because we're losing all the time. Losses, big and small, all the time, all of us. We just don't tell each other. In fact, isn't life just one continuous process of starting again? Our ancestors thought so too. 2,000 years ago, Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That was 2,000 years ago. 500 years before that, Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, said, "Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." The point is, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the comeback. It always has been about the comeback. Rising is as built into the operating system as falling is. And that's why I've created this podcast, because I want to honor both. Because the fall, as much as that might hurt, is the active ingredient in the rise. I started this podcast because I wanted to create a platform to have the types of conversations that people are afraid to have. About their losses and their defeats and the lessons that had to be repeated. Because life is messy. We're messy. We're disheveled and disorderly. And the payback for pretending otherwise is diminishing. I want this podcast to give people permission to claim their defeats and losses, to own them, to talk about them, to carry them lightly, not out of some unhealthy attachment to the past, but because by doing so, we neuter them, we defang them, we take the venom out of them. They lose their power over us. I think by shining a light on those moments that bring us to our knees actually allows us to reclaim ourselves. There is healing in a comeback story, medicine, as much for the teller as the listener. But there's also potential and possibility and renewal. And in the same way as a nebula, that gaseous cloud of dust in space, in the same way as that breaks down old stars to create new ones, I think our failures create our new beginnings. I want this podcast to be as much about new beginnings as it is about reframing old endings. I want to talk about what it means to start again, how to start again, how to rebuild, what's worth rebuilding. You won't just be hearing comeback stories. You'll be hearing from teachers and experts and coaches on what it takes to rebuild, how to navigate change, the mindset that's required, and what's worth coming back to. My hope is that this podcast inspires you, that it invites you to become the hero in your own story, to live as authentically as you dare, to be bold, to take risks, to be fearless, not because you've got it all worked out, but in spite of the fact that you don't. I want it to be a reminder to you and me that failure to launch moment was not life-defining. It was simply a precious part of the process. Most of all, I want the podcast to be a reminder for all of us that when life falls apart, the real work is not in rebuilding what was lost. It's in rediscovering who we are. I'll be back after the break to talk about where the idea for the podcast came from, because in many ways, it's part of my own comeback story. Welcome back, beautiful people, and welcome back to The Greatest Comeback, a podcast that tells comeback stories. Now, because this is episode 1 of the podcast, and the podcast is about stories, I thought I'd tell one of my own. This story starts in 2016, when I was approached to work for a tech startup. I'd worked in technology sales my whole career. I've sold hardware and software and everything in between. It wasn't necessarily what I dreamed of as a kid, but hey, I'm a storyteller. I love stories, and selling is storytelling, so I was good at it. I am good at it. And I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? This thing's going to fail or it's going to get acquired. Either way, I'm going to learn a bunch of stuff and have an experience that I haven't had before. So I dived in. I jumped in. There were 7 or 8 people that kicked things off. And the first 12 months were hard. As you'd expect, this was a disruptive technology and it was disrupting a legacy market. And there was lots of prospecting and lots of door knocking and lots of no's, lots of rejections, lots of no thank yous. But that was okay because we were having fun. We were bootstrapping. We were flying the plane and building it at the same time. So for the first 12 months, it was tricky. But about 18 months in, something happened. We won. I seem to recall we won 1 or 2 really big accounts, lighthouse accounts, organizations that other companies look to because of the way they innovate and the way they manage and run their businesses. And slowly the flywheel started to turn. We won some more accounts. We started to win some industry awards. We had some customers that were willing to stand on stage and advocate for the technology. And all of a sudden we had some momentum. There was movement. And I thought to myself, oh, this thing's not going to fail. This is going well. In fact, it went really well. Better than I ever thought. Better than anyone that worked at the company ever thought. At one point in time, I think everyone I was working with was either buying a house or a car or both. People were making serious money. And then to top it off, it went public. Rather than get acquired, it went all the way and became a public company. And it wasn't just an IPO, it was the most successful IPO in its category ever. So it was a wonderful time, and I got the opportunity, I got promoted, I got the opportunity to build my own team. I hired a team of killers. We went out and recruited the best partners that were exceptional at what they did. And really, for the next 4 years, I did nothing but make money, have fun, and travel. Now, if you are a storyteller or you love story, your intuition might tell you this is the point in my story where things go south. And if that's what your intuition is telling you, then congratulations, because this is the pivot in my story. Because as much as working for nimble, fun startup and then having that turn into behemoth company is fun and rewarding, it brings investment dollars and it brings investors, all of whom have their own expectations. With those investment dollars came more headcount, more roles, more jobs, vertical and horizontal functions, support functions, more oversight, more scrutiny, more of the machinery of big business, and certainly more expectation. Now, I have found that in business, as in life, things happen slowly, then suddenly. When we missed our first number, I was more perplexed than I was concerned. I thought, this is interesting. This hasn't happened before. And then we'd hit a number and miss a number, and hit a number and miss 2. And that continued for probably 12 months. And the business was really choppy. And The competition started to catch up. There was more scrutiny in terms of budget. Customers were more discerning in terms of where they invested their dollars. And it became difficult. It became difficult, and there was pressure. For the first time ever in my experience in that company, there was pressure and there was fear. There was fear. I could see it in people's faces. I could feel it in my team. I could feel it in myself. And I didn't like it. I did everything I could to fix it. We ran promotional campaigns. We offered incentives. We discounted the product, but nothing seemed to work. In fact, the numbers got worse. Now, enterprise sales is a contact sport, and a track record of success does not inoculate you from delivering this quarter's number. I knew I was in trouble. I could feel it. I could feel it coming. The conversations between my manager and I had become more formal. The correspondence looked as though it had been written by someone else. There were performance improvement plans, and I could feel it. I could feel the end was coming, and then it did. I got an email from my boss asking him to meet me in the office the next morning, which I did. I opened the door to the sales floor, and straight away I knew. The atmosphere was electric, although it was completely quiet. I could feel the energy. There were 4 or 5 people in the office. I went along the rows and said hello. I waved to a couple of people, and then I saw my manager, and I thought, okay, this is definitely it. His face was red. I felt sorry for him. He was agitated. He was clearly nervous. I was nervous. And we walked into a room and we sat down. There was a bit of banter. And he took a breath and said, hey, listen, the numbers haven't been good for a while. We've decided to make a change. We'd like you to finish up today. Do you have any questions? Now, as much as I was prepared for that moment, nothing really prepares you for that. I hadn't expected to be walked out of the building on the same day. I hadn't expected not to be able to say goodbye to anyone or say goodbye to the team that I'd built and grown to love. But you know what? That's business. No hard feelings. No, I had no questions. We walked out. I said goodbye to a couple of people. I shook some hands. We walked up to HR, where I sat and proceeded to submit my last expense claims. And I handed across my badge. And at some point in the conversation, the question was asked of me, what would you like us to tell people? And I thought, I wasn't expecting that question either. Now, there have been many moments in my life where I have shrunk, more moments than I care to admit to. But that wasn't one of them. I was proud of the job that I'd done there, and I was proud of the contribution. So I took a breath. And rather than construct some narrative about me resigning in order to save face or ensure that a prospective employer wasn't going to be put off by the fact that I'd been fired, I said, I want you to tell people the truth. I want you to tell people that I've been dismissed, and whatever reasons you give them aren't important to me. And so with that, I grabbed my empty laptop bag and I was escorted out of the building. Now, for the next 2 weeks, my phone rang hot. It was like I still had a job. People were calling to find out what happened, to tell me how unfair they thought it was, to offer me support, to ask me what I was going to do. And the busyness of that period, the drama of it all, kept me from having to deal with the taxi rank full of feelings that were lined up waiting to be felt. The embarrassment, the shame, the relief. But as the weeks rolled by, the calls became less frequent. The weeks turned into months. People were getting on with their lives. And as my old life receded, what came back was grief, a deep sense of grief. Grief for the relationships that I left behind. Grief for the 7 years that I'd invested in that company. Grief for the version of me that I'd left behind, that I knew was never coming back. And it was in that period of solitude, without the phone ringing, that I realized that that job had become everything to me. My whole identity, who I was, my personal power, whatever personal agency I had was wrapped up into that job and that guy and that identity. And without it, I didn't know who I was anymore. And I was lost. And for a period of time, I went into what I would describe as a deep funk. It wasn't so much a midlife crisis as it was, I guess, a slow, brutal unraveling. I was 52. What was I going to do? Well, I did what any self-respecting middle-aged white guy would do. I got a therapist. In fact, for the next 12 months, I did everything I could to discover who I really was. Who was I when I wasn't playing that character, without the bells and whistles, without the tinsel? Every time the prospect of a job came up, there was something inside me that said no. No, don't do this. This is an important point in your life. This is a waypoint, a transition point, a doorway. You'll just be the same guy on a different stage. I had to figure out who I was and what I stood for. What were my values? How do I want to walk in the world? I knew that I had to get existential before I got tactical. I read every self-help book I could get my hands on. I listened to every podcast. I spent a king's ransom on therapy. Rose, if you do listen to this, you're worth every penny. I did breath work. I meditated. I chanted. I did ice baths. I did sound baths. I did silent retreats. I flew to Peru twice and did 2 ayahuasca retreats. And at some point in that process, I don't exactly know when, the question started to play on my mind. At first I couldn't hear it because there was too much distraction, but the more I was sitting in this period of solitude, the louder it got. And the question was, what if the worst thing that ever happened to you turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? The American writer Zora Neale Hurston once wrote, "There are years that ask questions and years that answer." I love that. Because what if losing your business leads you to building a bigger, more successful one? What if losing your health leads you to becoming the fittest and the healthiest that you've ever been? What if having your heart broken leads you to a deeper, more meaningful connection with someone else? What if getting fired from a job leads you to a deeper and more meaningful connection with yourself? Or starting a podcast? People think that comebacks are all about getting the stuff back. The identity, the job, the business, the relationship. But I don't think that's the point. I think the point of a comeback is the process itself. It's about how we grow and evolve along the way. One thing I've learned is that change takes time, often far longer than we want or allow. It's in the movement between where we were and where we're heading that we need space. We need to allow time just to be, a time to not know. Julia Samuel, the British psychotherapist, calls that time after a crisis the fertile void. It's a time that we need to reflect and withdraw and restore before we jump back into life. So that's what I've been doing, reflecting and restoring, occupying the fertile void, like a trapeze artist that's let go of one bar and is waiting for the next one to arrive. I don't have any answers yet, I've got to tell you. This comeback is far from complete. I don't think the best ones ever are. There's still a lot of not knowing, and that's okay. I think a big part of the process for me has been getting comfortable with not knowing. It's been about tuning in to my inner wisdom, my intuition, and allowing myself to be guided by that. And you know what that guidance system has been telling me? Do this. Do this podcast. This feels right. This feels expansive. This is me jumping back in. I don't know whether getting fired from that job was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It probably wasn't. But I'm glad it happened. I was comfortable. I was too comfortable to choose to grow on my own. So the universe, in its wisdom, put its hand in the small of my back and gave me a little shove. So in a weird way, I'm actually really grateful to the people that played a part in that. Whether it turns out to be the best thing that's ever happened to me, I guess I'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I'm going all in on this podcast because it speaks to me, because it feels expansive, because I don't know what I'm doing. And the process of not knowing what I'm doing and feeling uncomfortable is actually revealing who I'm becoming. So my intention with this is to simply be of service to both you and me, to remind us both that in order to live an expansive, fully expressed life, growth is mandatory. Doing hard things is mandatory. Surviving hard things is mandatory. That our response to failure determines our capacity for success. I'll be back after the break to wrap things up with 2 humble requests and an invitation. Welcome back, beautiful people. And if you've made it this far, thank you. I really appreciate it. There are so many podcasts out there, so many things to look at and listen to. The fact that you've given this first episode of a brand new podcast your time, I really appreciate it. Look, now that it's out, I don't know what it's going to be. I'm kind of excited to see what this thing becomes. All I know is that I'm fully committed to it. I'm fully committed to doing an episode once a week. And I mean, my job as I see it is to show up as open-heartedly and as authentically as I can, and try and create a space and a container for people to do the same. Because I think that's where the medicine is. It's in the vulnerability, la medicina. That's where the value is for all of us. So that's the intention. Look, here's my first request, if I may. Getting any creative project off the ground is difficult at the best of times, to say nothing of what one has to deal with when it comes to wrestling thoughts. Thoughts like, there are too many podcasts out there. Why are you doing this? This has been done before. What will people think? There's a good one. And I have had to wrestle every single one of those motherfuckers down to the ground. And let me tell you, they pop back up. So I've got to hold them down. So it has been an endeavor to get this thing birthed. Now that it's out, if the content resonates, please support it. I would love your support. Like it, share it. If you know someone that's going through a crisis of their own, a family member, a colleague, maybe they can listen to this as well. But whatever you can do to support the podcast, I'd really appreciate it. Help the podcast find its audience. That'd be amazing. The second request, look at me asking for stuff already, is help me find great comeback stories. There are so many great comeback stories out there that haven't been told. Maybe you know someone with a great comeback story. Maybe you're sitting on your own comeback story that hasn't been told, and maybe it's time it was told. So if you do have a story or you know of someone, please get in contact with me. I'd love to tell it. Folks, the podcast is weekly. It's out on Spotify. It's out on YouTube. It's available on Apple Podcasts and wherever you get your podcasts. That's it. End of episode 1. Now, I did want to leave you with an invitation. And the invitation is this. If you're listening to this and you are going through your own personal crisis, I want you to know that this is not the end. This is actually the beginning. This crisis is an opportunity for you to come back better and greater than before. When God wanted David to be king, he didn't send him a crown. He sent him Goliath. So if you're in that place right now, or if you know someone that is, let's have the conversation together. Let's redefine what it means to break and come back. Because the greatest comeback we can ever make is to ourselves. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.